September 4th, 1969, the premiere of the film Shadows of Forgotten Ancestors was held at the Ukraina Movie Theatre in Kyiv. The director of the film, Serhii Parajanov, was speaking on stage. The speech was not an easy one. The author was talking about obstacles in the filming process, oppression and reprimands he felt from the authorities. It became clear that the debut of this film must be unusual. Meanwhile, KGB employees surrounded the cinema from outside. After Parajanov, the Ukrainian literary critic and public figure Ivan Dzyuba took the stage to make the first public protest against the government policy in the USSR. He disclosed information about the secret arrests of representatives of the Ukrainian creative intelligentsia, the first wave of which took place just before the premiere. Strong disagreement with the arrests of Ukrainian artists at the premiere of Parajanov's film became an unprecedented historical event. In fact, the film Shadows of Forgotten Ancestors, which was already famous all over the European world of cinema, would be banned for years. However, it would forever become a symbol of the awakening of Ukrainian national self-awareness and example in the struggle of Ukrainians for their rights and the beginning of resistance to the Soviet system. As a person with unquenchable yearning for freedom, Parajanov himself would support the protest. As a mountaineer who loved Ukraine too much and, by his own admission, left his heart on Ukrainian soil. Tiflis, now Tbilisi. Sergo Parajanov, the third child in an Armenian family, was born in one of its bustling courtyards in 1924. Could this artist have been born elsewhere? No, he couldn't have, would say later all those being in touch, directly or indirectly, with the director's work, because it was in such Tbilisi courtyards that people of different nationalities, cultures and religious denominations lived, Armenians and Georgians, Azerbaijanis and Kurds, Greeks and Jews. Little Sergo grew up among a variety of nationalities. He grew up in freedom. Besides, he was surrounded by the exquisite antiques of the East, as his father Joseph's antique shop was filled with them. Over time, these refined objects would find their new life in the films of director Parajanov and would become his calling card. And the Tbilisi subculture would impact a deliberately ethnographic character to his films. People would be generous with words to recognize Parajanov, calling him a legendary man, a genius of the 20th century, but that would be later. Parajanov would be searching for this genius inside of him for a long time. The feeling of passion and inspiration never left him. In his youth, he never stopped trying himself in various fields: choreography, singing, music, until he realized later only cinema can bring together all his interests. In 1946, Parajanov was already a student at the All-Union State Institute of Cinematography. It was during his studies at this university that he was arrested for the first time in Tbilisi on a charge of homosexuality. However, the talented young man was released from detention at the insistence of Alexander Dovzhenko, who was the supervisor of Parajanov's student course at that time. In the end, Dovzhenko encouraged the young filmmaker to pursue his career at the Kyiv Film Studio. Right here in Ukraine, after 10 years at lesser-known jobs, the 40-year-old Serhii Parajanov would create a milestone film not only in his career, but also in Ukrainian cinema as a whole. He would screen a classic of Ukrainian literature by Mikhailo Kotyubinsky.
For an artist, a film is always a declaration of love. As soon as I read the novel by Kotyubinsky, I felt an urge to make it into a film. I fell in love with this crystal-clear feeling of beauty, harmony, infinity, a sense of the edge where nature merges into art, and art into nature.
As Parajanov believed, the Soviet authorities allowed the screenplay of Kotyubinsky's novel for one reason. The leaders were certain that the Armenian would not delve into Ukrainian context and would produce an average movie. But how wrong those people in power were. This very choice of a novel by Kotyubinsky was already very revealing. After all, this story is dedicated to a distinctive ethnic group among Ukrainians, the Hutuls. They are the ones who are often considered bearers of the cultural and genetic code of Ukrainians. At the same time, they exist in a cross-cultural environment, that is, they intersect with other cultures. Parajanov became so interested in this topic that during the filming process he settled among the Hutsuls in Transcarpathia and was eagerly studying their customs and way of life. The director also liked the melodious Hutsul language.
Ідеш, Іван?
Іду, Марічко. Така вже доля. До зими вернуся. А ти чекай.
In order not to lose the special Hutsul dialect in the film, Parajanov insisted that Shadows of Forgotten Ancestors should not be translated into Russian under any circumstances. Such defense of the language by Parajanov went parallel to the struggle for the revival of the national language in Ukraine. But even the director's fiction about the Hutsuls nestled surprisingly well in the film.
Там есть знаменитая сцена свадьбы, где там...
There is a famous wedding scene there where the new lads are yoked. They will go hand in hand for the rest of their lives. They are singing. It was found out that this was a folk ritual. Then it became clear how it happened in reality. As a matter of fact, Parajanov came up with this ritual along the way. There was no such folk custom. And what is even more interesting, local seniors who saw this said, "You know, that's absolutely true. There used to be such ceremonies. We just forgot them. We forgot, but this bearded guy, he somehow knew it. Actually, none of that ever happened. Parajanov invented this. You have to be a very brave person to come up with such a thing, so that people do not perceive it as something foreign. It's all about fantasy, talent and mighty energy."
Талант, энергия сумасшедшая.
The artist was so demanding and principled that sometimes he did not pay attention to whether an adult actor was in front of him or a child. Marichka, the main character of Shadows, was portrayed as a child by 9-year-old girl from Kharkiv, Valentina Glenko. She recalled,
Once I interrupted the shooting. I was in a bad mood. I was capricious. I was like, I want to go home, I want to go home. Well, they had to take me home. Then I caught it in the neck from Parajanov for it. He was very scrupulous. In the film, I had to cross-stitch. I didn't know how to do it. And Serhii Yosipovich himself was teaching me that. In one of the movie fragments, I had to portray a scared girl, but I failed at it many times. And then he struck the tambourine so hard and so sharply behind my back that I even jumped up from fear.
As a result, the film Shadows of Forgotten Ancestors became not only one of the most famous films in the world, it made a revolution. It became an epitome of Ukrainian political cinema, having received 39 international awards, 28 prizes at film festivals, including 24 Grand Prix in 21 countries of the world. Parajanov became a national hero. After all, thanks to him, the authentic Hutsul language was heard in cinemas for the first time and without translation. Some film critics admitted that even Dovzhenko's films were not as Ukrainian in spirit as Parajanov's Shadows. It seems hard to believe it, but after the success of the film, Parajanov did not film anything for 9 years. He just had no permission to do it. They expressed distrust in the already recognized director and rejected all his creative ideas.
He said, "My films, which are not understood in the Soviet Union, are however well understood by the inhabitants of Africa and by the Indians in Argentina. And our governing organs, they don't have a clue at all about my films and they still want to imprison me. And our Minister of Culture," he said, "is a former floor polisher because he confuses the words mastic and mystic."
The KGB had the director on the hook for a long time. And in 1973, after another protest speech, Parajanov was arrested after being accused of homosexuality and Ukrainian nationalism. According to eyewitnesses, the case was hastily fabricated based on an anonymous denunciation. The filmmaker was sentenced to 5 years in prison. It sounds unbelievable, but after disfiguring Parajanov's life and ruining his career, the prison raised Parajanov the artist. When filmmaking was no longer possible, he concentrated on creating collages. He created them from odds and ends he was picking: paper and glass, feathers and buttons, candlesticks and wires, dials and fragments of precious dishes. Clutter has turned into works of art. Parajanov's collages, there are about 800 of them, have been recognized as original and exquisite works of art.
Равных ему фантазий.
Obviously, he had no equals in the fantasy of transforming simple objects into works of art. Anyway, nothing similar is known to this day.
Поэтому неизвестно.
Это был потрясающий, уникальный.
He was an amazing, unique, extraordinary, brilliant person, a huge number of outstanding masters of cinematography who hardly ever looked in our direction, in the direction of our cinema, saw the fantastic talent of Parajanov. His true fans were Federico Fellini, Pier Paolo Pasolini, Tonino Guerra, Andrei Tarkovsky. When I started shooting a film about Serhii Yosipovich Parajanov a few years ago, I realized once again that in my childhood I lived in the same house with a genius.
However, after his release from arrest, the director, who had made Ukrainian cinema famous all over the world, was forbidden to live in Kiev. The title of People's Artist of Ukraine was awarded in the year of his death, 1990.
У меня вот состояние сейчас праздничное, потому что я сегодня получил звание.
Какой, извините?
I'm in a festive mood right now, because I've got a title today.
Украина мне дала народного артиста.
Поздравляю вас, это очень радостно.
Ukraine has given me the title of People's Artist. It is a great gift, so much attention. People's Artist and honored art worker mean a lot.
Государственный деятель искусства очень много значит. Когда человек
Especially when a person has worked in Ukraine for 32 years without any attention, just lived there, that's all.
в Украине без всякого внимания просто прожил.
Through the words of Serhii Parajanov, one can feel that his life was not only full of a series of brilliant creative ascents, but also of colossal injustice and suffering. And isn't it suffering that is hidden in a well-known cinematic symbol, the bleeding pomegranate? The Color of Pomegranates is another well-known film by Parajanov about life and work of the Armenian poet and troubadour Sayat-Nova. But the flamboyant master Parajanov managed to put an explosive device even in such a seemingly calm film. He invited a woman for the lead male role, and she was a Georgian on top of it. We are talking about the actress Sofiko Chiaurelli. She starred in the film about the Armenian poet to portray him as an adult. Parajanov's decision was called scandalous and impertinent. Nevertheless, The Color of Pomegranates was recognized as a genius film, because Parajanov implemented his idea, a deep immersion into Armeniancy, reflections on the mission of Armenians in history, through extremely complex and powerful symbols. A poet is mortal, but he is immortal in what he leaves to his successors. The filmmaker was not mistaken. He became immortal himself, not only as a genius director, but also as a brilliant couturier who decided personally on the costumes of the main characters and fixed that in the scripts. Here he beautifully combined red velvet and scribbles in the outfit of Princess Anna from the film The Color of Pomegranates, because these colors convey the inner state of the actress in the best way possible. 30 years after his death, Hollywood stars would shoot clips the way Parajanov did, admiring his original style. Directors would try to interpret him in a new way in modern films. And Harvard University would include Shadows of the Forgotten Ancestors and The Color of Pomegranates in the lists of film that must be seen by applicants for an advanced degree in film studies. It means that the global interest in Parajanov is not letting up to this day, because probably it is difficult to find a modern artist with such a personal approach as this mountaineer had to each actor. And if Fellini is a truly Italian director, Wajda is truly Polish, Kurosawa is Japanese, it is much more difficult to decide on Parajanov. Where does he belong?
I am an Armenian who was born in Tbilisi and was in a Russian prison for Ukrainian nationalism.